Jano, the machine that is the UFC is far more than just the fighters that we see competing in the octagon. There is so much that happens outside of it as well. And my next guest is a true testament to the busy bees that bring it all together. We are joined today by UFC broadcaster Megan Olivi. Megan, kia ora and hello. Welcome to UFC on Sky.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited. Everybody loves this show, so I'm so glad to be a part of it. Thank you.
Excellent. We love that we've got this positive little reputation going on over there at the moment. We love to see it. Look, I'm intrigued when I watch you on these UFC broadcasts because you bring such a different element as opposed to just presenting and commentating. Not saying that, not belittling that aspect at all.
Sure.
But, in terms of being a sports broadcaster and getting a job at the UFC, how did this all come about?
Man, it's kind of crazy. I mean, I guess most of it came about its very origin because I was dating my now husband, Joseph Benavides, and I would go to WEC fights with him when he was either fighting or when he had to do some guest appearances. And because of the history and the background of combat sports within my family, I really understood what was going on. I ended up knowing a lot of people involved in the sport just because of the wrestling tie-in with my brother. And so I decided to do sports broadcasting my senior year in college. So I was getting my master's and they were like, hey, do you want to cover mixed martial arts? Do you want to cover the UFC? And I'm like, sure. And it was all kind of magic from there.
That's amazing because, I mean, as a sports broadcaster, I consider myself to be a sport broadcaster as well. And you have to have quite the repertoire of sports, right? Like for some people, they cover more than one. So what other things are you doing besides mixed martial arts?
Well, I'm really fortunate. In the past, I have covered baseball and some other sports, but I work for the NFL as well. So I work for NFL on Fox. So during the fall and winter, you can see me on most Sundays on a sideline. So it involves a lot of red-eye flights, not a lot of sleep from Saturday night fight cards into Sunday mornings on a football field. But it's a huge privilege, here in the United States, that is the number one sport. It's like a religion for a lot of people on Sundays to watch football here. So to be a part of the very, very few people that are allowed access to the field, that broadcast those games, I don't take it lightly. So I feel like I have the two best jobs in the world, honestly, between the UFC and the NFL. And I just feel really grateful that the UFC has always been supportive of those extra endeavors. And the NFL on Fox team has just been absolutely incredible. I'm going into my 5th season this year. So it's fun. It's super different. But at the end of the day, it's still, storytelling with athletes. And they're all sort of similar in their own regards when you get to know them.
Are you able to, how do I describe it, like cross-credit it at all? Because no matter what broadcast you're doing, it kind of adds to your kit of knowledge and what you're doing in front of the camera, right? So how do they perhaps work side by side?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, they really do, because in the NFL, you're only really on camera the very beginning of the game before kickoff, right after halftime, and then at the end of the game when you're interviewing whoever was the standout player. But so everything else is off camera, and you have to be very descriptive with your words and really explain things that are happening that only I am privy to. Usually there's not a camera on those scenarios. So I really carry that over into when I'm sitting at the octagon doing a little bit of commentary with the UFC. It sort of helped that role, which was probably not my strongest. And it's really helped me develop that. And it helps you be a better storyteller when there isn't always a picture to back it up.
UFC today looks very different to the UFC when you joined, which was almost a decade ago. What attracted you to the organization? Because this was before the blow up that it is now.
Yeah, no, I think innately I was attracted because I come from a family that was full of boxers and wrestlers. So I just felt like I was very comfortable in that world and in that type of atmosphere. I really understood kind of what was going on. It wasn't foreign to me. Weight cuts weren't weird, and seeing somebody get stitches, none of that was odd to me. But I think what appealed really once I started to follow it more was the different stories that these athletes have, because you have to have something a little different inside you to want to fight another human being inside an octagon, with a door locked behind you. And I think once I started getting to know some of these personalities, even on a small scale, I thought, man, there's just so much to every single individual that gets in there. I would love to know more and tell the audience more about them. And I think that was really what hooked me.
Absolutely. And I actually take a lot of pride in doing that myself and working out who they are, the human that makes them the complete athlete, right? And that's a great component that I enjoy watching in these, not many, they're almost like little documentaries, they're little profile stories of these fighters. But I mean, how do you do it? Because, male athletes can be quite proud, and then you chuck a fighter in the mix, and it can be even, you could be Stonewall a lot of the times, but you seem to bring out this vulnerability in them and be able to make these beautiful stories. How do you do it?
Oh, thank you very much. That's really kind. I think for me, number one, the fact that I'm married to Joseph, I think most fighters know that I understand a lot of where they're coming from. I think that if you give them a platform of trust, if you let them know, hey, this is a safe space, this isn't to exploit you or to catch you saying something you don't want, the rest of the media to hear you saying, like, it's not like that. So I think if you can let them feel comfortable to express themselves, that's the biggest key. But I also think, honestly, sometimes they don't realize how incredible their stories are, because it's just their stories. So to them, it's nothing, but you'll hear some of these things they tell you and you're like, oh my, what? And for me, it blows my mind. They're like, oh, is that weird? Or is that daunting? So I think that's the other half of it, but really just making sure that they feel safe. And if they are telling you something, hey, is it okay if I say this? Is it okay if we tell the viewers about this? And they've never said no, but just to make sure you add that layer of comfort and protection for them, I think goes a very long way.
Yeah, I 100% agree. How important is that aspect of it for you? I feel like you're talking about being a part of that MMA community. Before you were in the UFC, so the fighters kind of already have that relationship. You said that understanding about the MMA community and really giving a damn about the sport, basically. Was that imperative for you to be able to do stories like that?
Absolutely. Because I think for a while, it wasn't maybe looked at in the light that it is now. And maybe the athletes weren't given the credit that they were due then and are certainly due now as well. And I think that when you show respect and you understand, hey, this is no small feat what you're doing, the sacrifices you are making are on a monumental scale, and I don't want to dumb that down. I want you to understand how big that is and, what your contribution to the sport is because of it, I think is always really important. And it has been, especially through these past 10 years, to tell people that sometimes, and to let them know that, hey, we see you. You're not just like a cog here. You are really a major player, and your sacrifices aren't for nothing. They're for you to chase your dreams and be a part of this huge sport that is now growing and giving generations of kids something to look forward to that, when we were growing up, we weren't like, oh yeah, I want to do mixed martial arts when we were 8. Now there's kids who just take MMA classes because it's a real thing and it's a real athletic pursuit for them.
Yeah, that's right. And it just normalizes it, doesn't it? And that word, humanizing comes into it again, where you're reaching out to people who might not even be MMA fans, but these stories are like, wow, I want to see more.
Exactly. And that's always my goal. I always try to write my scripts for those walkout hits as if somebody is watching a fight that knows nothing about either competitor. So if they can walk away from their TV knowing a little bit about their personal human story, then for me, my job has been done.
Yeah, well done on that, because I felt like it started as that walkout thing and now it's grown into this little series, hasn't it?
Yes. So the very first card on ESPN, we were kind of starting over with new ideas, and not that Fox ever said no, but it was just like, hey, you know what? We've been having this idea. Let's try it. And so, our producers and my boss were like, we're going to try some of these and we'll see how it goes, but don't mess up. So, we did them, and it's just really grown from there. And I feel really fortunate to carry that sort of challenge on my back and be able to do it so that every show, no matter who is working, you're going to learn more about these athletes as human beings because they deserve it. And it's important to the sport.
And you've set the standard now. Like, this is something, you've pioneered it within the UFC. So that's something that you should be really, really proud of. And when you think back though to UFC 166, when you first became this full-time member of the UFC, what was that like? And I mean, some of us cringe when we think about our early days, but what was it like for you? How did that night go?
I still cringe like watching last week. So I cringe always. I'm like, how do I have a job? No, I think I just remember being like really excited to officially be part of the UFC. I had covered the UFC for stuff, but now to actually be on the team and be a part of the promotion and see the inner workings, I think was really cool. I remember being very nervous, but also very at home. Like I knew that it was still going to be challenging, but I felt that was where I belonged. So it took kind of some of the scariness away from the scenario. And I don't think I ever want to watch any of those things that I did back, because I'll always watch like recent fights back to see what I could do better and, you know, what looks good and what fits the molds. But I'd prefer to skip those.
It is hard. It is. I know exactly what you're saying. It's so tough to look back, and even if other people say, "Oh, watched you on da 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 da," and you're just like, "Oh no, did you?"
Yes. Yes. I'm so sorry you had to see that.
Look, part of that environment that makes you feel comfortable, though, in the moment is the team around you, and of course, you're working alongside Daniel Cormier, Joe Rogan, Jon Anik. What has that been like?
We are a family. It is the most fun thing that you could ever imagine. And, you know, we've been through some really challenging, crazy scenarios, and we have banded together and we lean on one another. We are with each other so much that oftentimes we end up shouldering one another and each other's, you know, problems or their sacrifices or their excitement, just like a family member would. So, you know, we talk about our lives, both inside our professional careers and outside as well. And it's genuinely like a family. I feel like I could text any of those guys at any moment that I needed something and they would be right there to help solve the problem, and vice versa as well. So it's super fun. I mean, the dressing rooms can get like hilarious sometimes. We all kind of share a space, and before fights, I mean, it can be really funny, but, you know, there are things that we've been through together, especially, you know, when it came to like Fight Island or the first fight back with fans in Jacksonville, that you knew you were a part of something life-changing that only a handful of people were going to do. And we got to do it together, which is just so special to me.
It is special, and it does reflect to the viewer as well, and it's really awesome to watch.
Oh, good.
There was an article that I saw you made a statement, I think it was to UFC fighters, saying if you want a successful UFC career, do what DC did. One of the reasons why I wanted you to come on this show was because I think we could say the same for you in terms of female broadcasters, because we definitely know that the world needs more. And so when you think about your career, especially being in such a male-dominated sport, how have you found your, experience of such at the UFC, being a male-dominated sport, and especially starting 10 years ago when there were even less women in the field?
Yeah, well, first off, I feel like I'm going to cry. That's the nicest thing ever. Thank you. But, you know, I think a lot of credit has to go to just the way the organization runs, because I've never felt like I was being treated a certain way because I was a woman, or they have to fit me in this mold. Oh, we need to hear from the woman on the team. I never felt like that. You know, I just kind of was ready when opportunities arose. Hey, a one-off here, a one-off there. And then I started proving my worth and doing well at all these scenarios. And I don't think they even really thought much about my gender in the choices that they made. But I do take a lot of pride, especially like right now, I take a lot of pride in being the only woman involved in these pay-per-view shows, you know, and I think it's important. And, you know, we have a large percentage of viewers who are women, and we only want to grow that. And, you know, our athletes, we have four weight classes for female fighters. And it's important that they also can see somewhat of themselves represented there. And, you know, for me, I think I just try to be the very best at the role that I can be, so that no one really looks at me and thinks like, oh, well, they have a woman on their team. They just think, oh, Megan is the best storyteller there is, and that's why she's in that position. And that's sort of how I try to frame it, because I think otherwise it's a lot of pressure to carry. But I am glad that, you know, other people in other sports have reached out, especially during the pandemic, and what we were able to do and what we've been able to do after, and just sort of ask for advice and how do you do this? And, you know, how do you do that? And it's felt good to be sort of the woman on the cutting edge of that with the UFC team.
Beautifully said. I mean, I know it sounds like I'm like kissing a bit of butt here, but I have to, you know, kudos where it's due, because it's not easy. anywhere in the world. And so when we do see a woman like yourself, you know, leading and doing great things like this, we should be lifting each other up. And that's why I make, you know, quite the effort in doing that. You mentioned the word advice. Do you have advice for young aspiring females who want to get into sport broadcasting? I know that we're in different parts of the world, but generally it is, you know, a general rule of thumb on how you can go about things. And for one, I think it's important for women like yourself to be able to talk about those experiences as well. It's important.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, my advice is sort of general for anybody, but, you know, it's a couple of different components. Number one, I'm a big believer in education. So if you can get some sort of education to sort of back up what you want to do, I think that's really important. A lot of people know right away that they want to be on camera. I certainly did not. But something that has helped me tremendously in my on-camera career is knowing how to produce. I cannot say that strongly enough. If you want to be a storyteller and you do want to be on camera, and whether it comes from reading from a teleprompter for, you know, whatever type of program to, you know, everything on the fly, if you know how to produce and you know what a shot should look like and how much time you have to tell a story, I think that is hugely vital to your on-camera abilities. But when you are just starting out, my number one advice is to do the work. Do not take the shortcuts. Make the decisions that will make your future self proud. It might seem slow going for a while. It might not be as glamorous as social media likes to make us believe that everyone's lives are, but you will certainly not regret it. And you will build every skill that you really need to be successful in the long run for a long time. So that's my number one advice. No matter who you are and what you want to do in terms of broadcasting, do the work. I know sometimes it's hard, but it always pays off.
That's actually a good advice for anybody in general, but no,
yeah.
Great advice. Great advice. Look, you've been in the UFC for, you know, quite a long time now. Is there any memory that sticks out to you, one of your favorite moments while being part of the UFC?
Oh man, that's a good question. I feel like there's a few. I think the Aldo McGregor World Tour will always stand out for me because we were on 3 continents, you know, over the span of just under 2 weeks, and we were flying on these private planes with Jose and Connor, and it was just sort of a wild time. And I felt like maybe that's when a lot of hype really started to begin. People were really believing in Connor, and you know, they came out in spades to watch him. I think going to SNL, Saturday Night Live, with Ronda Rousey, a scenario where not many people are allowed there, and you know, because of our relationship with UFC, she brought me along for that ride, and we got to film that experience. But then in terms of more recent, I would say the fights on Fight Island, that very first fight we had there, where none of us had any clue of what the heck was going on. And it was a little bit of a scary time. And, you know, we're living in this like enclosed space where there's actual armed guards, so we can't get out. And I would say that, and the first fight back with fans in Jacksonville last year when we came back, and you just felt from the time the music hit for the first fight, you just knew like this is setting a precedent for everybody. And it felt like the world was really watching, and it was just special. So I would say, although every fight I could tell you a highlight, those are the ones that stand out to me.
I love that last one that you spoke about with the crowds coming back and the way that the UFC were able to carry on during COVID. I'll be honest, I was very worried about it. I'm like, oh my Lord, what is going to happen? Because no one really knew what was happening with the virus, right? I'm like, just please be safe. And, you know, we talk to our New Zealand fighters before they fly out. And you're just like, oh, please just keep the mask on, do whatever they need, you know, whatever you need to do to stay safe. But you did it. The UFC did it. And you're right in saying that they did set the standard for around the world that it can be done. Talking of New Zealand fighters, Megan, of late, our New Zealand fighters have been doing pretty well on the UFC stage. It's been a gradual growth over the years, but I'm interested to get your perspective, being within, the beast of the UFC and looking outwards to New Zealand fighters and how they've grown over the years.
Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, they're doing tremendous. And I don't think they get enough credit for what they have had to go through in the past 2 years. I know that things are a lot better for them now, but the fact that they were away from their families for so long, and to be able to compete, they'd have to then live in a hotel on their way home for 2 weeks or however long it was. the sacrifice was just unthinkable sometimes from some of our athletes. And I truly don't believe that the world gives them enough credit for not just competing at the highest level, but winning at the highest level in the scenarios that they were in. So when you see Alexander Volkanovski and Israel Adesanya and Dan Hooker and all these people come out there and say, like, let's do it. I'm going to do whatever it takes, and it's not going to be ideal, but I'm just going to show up, which is number one, such a challenge in the past 2 years. And then the way they're winning, I mean, Kai Kara France, it's a really beautiful thing to watch. And it's awesome that our sport is so global, because now they just don't have fans in their region. They're known worldwide. I mean, I don't know if you saw this clip, but I was interviewing Kai, and then he was talking about Joe Burrow, who wasn't played in the Super Bowl. He was a quarterback for the Bengals. And Joe Burrow went and he wanted to take a picture with him, and he did. And he was like, I'm a big fan. And Kai's like, okay, I don't know who that is. But for everybody else, it's like, what? The guy was in the Super Bowl, you know? So I think it's so well-deserved and really such a beautiful thing to watch, because it's not just that mixed martial artists are getting their due, and it's not just that the regional fighters are getting their due, but it's so many things combined. And to do it at such a high level, which they are every single show, is really awesome.
Perhaps an idea for a future story for you.
There you go. Only if we can collab, you and I.
We'll keep it on the down low. But Megan, look, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I'll tell you what, I could talk to you all day. I could keep going and going with questions, but we don't have that kind of time. But
hey, let's do it anytime. Honestly, it's an honor and a thrill. And from one female in front of the camera to the other, like, congratulations on everything you're doing. Thank you for asking me to be a part of this. And like, you've got a sister in arms here.
Awesome. Well, we will definitely be asking you back in the future, and all the very best. There's so many cards coming up.
Yes. Thank you so much.